Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Archivists. I'm your host, Brandon, and boy oh boy, what a crazy last couple of weeks it's been. In fact, 4 weeks, I think. It has now been, I think, close to 4 weeks since Hurricane Helene carved a path of destruction through my little city of Asheville, as well as the greater majority of the western North Carolinas, Georgia, and also Florida. In fact, two tornadoes touched down around mine and my partner's house and uprooted several trees behind our house and dropped a few of them on our roof before ultimately bouncing away. The tornadoes themselves sounded like a T-Rex from Jurassic Park just roaring outside my window with heavy metallic scraping sounds mixed in. And friends, that might have been the scariest sound I've ever heard in my life. It will be a very long time before Asheville will be able to fully pull itself together after this large-scale, natural, catastrophic event. And that's not even thinking about the outlying cities that are either wiped off the face of this planet or near impossible to get to without a helicopter. If you are listening to this and want to help, there are two great local organizations you can send donations to. One is Beloved Asheville at belovedasheville.com, and the other one is the Asheville Poverty Initiative at ashevillepovertyinitiative.org. You can also find both on Facebook if you look up their pages. I will also have links to their web pages in the description below. If you visit Beloved Asheville's Facebook page, they have a flyer posted with everything that they need, like all the items that they need donated, as well as links for financial funds. Because let me tell you, there are a lot of people here who are both without jobs, without housing, both, and can't afford to live or do anything because capitalism does not stop when a hurricane hits, unfortunately. So hit them up, send them an email, ask them what they need if you're still kind of questioning what to send. Money is always a good option, I think. Sending money is a-okay. Anyways, thank you. Now, I know I said I would do an episode over RRR, but I'm going to be honest with y'all. I get distracted pretty easily, and pre-Helene, I started looking back over an essay I'd previously been working on over The Last of Us, and that led me to start playing The Last of Us again, which then led me to start taking notes over The Last of Us in an attempt to write an episode over the social politics that exist within the game. Now, that was what I was previously planning to do, but of course, all of that came to a halt when Helene hit. I had originally planned to just pick it back up once the power was restored, and also the internet, but as it turned out, when we finally did get power and internet back, which we were insanely lucky, like both came on around the same time, this coincided with a certain game that I had been hotly anticipating for some time releasing. A certain game called Silent Hill 2 Remake. Now, I tried real hard to hold off on it. I told myself, Brandon, you should finish what you started with The Last of Us first. And I really meant to finish what I started with The Last of Us. But in the end, I bought Silent Hill 2 Remake, and now I'm addicted to it, so now I'm doing an episode over it. Huzzah! So, if you want to play along with me, I have played roughly to the 5-hour mark, which also coincides with when you meet Maria for the first time. So essentially, we're playing to when you meet Maria for the first time. I've heard this game can take between 11 to 15 or even 16 hours to play through, depending on how much you're doing. And I plan to do a lot, so I will be exploring everything. So I'll be doing each episode in 5-hour gameplay segments. Also, this is the first time I've played Silent Hill 2, like ever. I've never played the original Silent Hill 2. I've only watched playthroughs of it as I wasn't sure how to actually play it as the PlayStation Store took it down. And the original copies are really hard to get and very expensive if you can find them. I had heard that it was on Good Old Games, but um, I checked and it is, and only Silent Hill 4 is on Good Old Games. Also, I just went ahead and bought the remake, so oops. So, with that being said, buckle up and get ready to go on this really scary ride with me through the world of Silent Hill. So, first up, we have the opening movie, and the opening movie is really good. The water on James' face is really gross and milky looking. It's interesting that Bloober went with that look. Like, I really want to know why they chose to make it look milky, because it looks like he was washing his face with something else, and it wasn't water, and it definitely wasn't milk. Um, Also, to clarify, the opening movie scene is our main character, James, coming into a mirror. He's in a bathroom washing his hands and his face, and he looks nervous as hell, too. When he's washing his hands, it looks super realistic, like the way the water glistens off the flesh and the flesh tones, and then the part where he's putting his thumb into his hand, like the skin touching skin and pressing into the flesh is so well rendered. Like, I was pretty impressed by it, to be honest. James's design kind of has this sad boy David Duchovny thing going on, and especially also how he kind of delivers his lines as well. Um, I've heard some reviewers say he also looks like a young David Lynch. Uh, if you gave David Lynch David Duchovny's hair, essentially, but which I've looked up pictures of young David Lynch, and I can see it in his face. I don't see it in the hair, but I definitely see it in the face. Right off the bat, too, I want to say that this game does a thing really well that Naughty Dog does and has been known to do in their recent games. Um, and that's capture emotions on the face. Everything from the facial expression to the way the eyes look and even the glint in the eyes can tell you things. Um, they did it really well. Like, Naughty Dog was amazing at it, and Bloober Team really did a good job with their mo captures. Like, so good. You can hear the shaky uncertainty in his voice when he talks, and you can see it in his eyes and his facial expressions as he's washing his hands. I also really like that this game lets you sit with this moment a little bit before he starts talking, too. So you come out of the bathroom at an overlook to Silent Hill and you hear Mary talk. She sounds weak and kind of sad. She says she's waiting for you at their favorite spot in Silent Hill. You really feel the sadness too when she says, "You said you would bring me back here, but you never did." Ouch. James says all of Silent Hill was their favorite spot and then says, "Could she really be alive? That damn sickness took her 3 years ago." So, with that, you start your journey into Silent Hill. I'll say right off the bat, like, the intensity doesn't really kick in quite yet. The music is creepy for sure, but it's not as intensely overbearing as it was in the original when you're doing the forest walk. On the other hand, this game really lets you experience how empty it is. Like, there's no sounds. Not even animals are making sounds. I think it really shows how empty the town is and how empty the forest is and how, like, literally it is very oddly devoid of any life at all. In your journey towards Silent Hill, when you take the path down, you will meet Angela. You meet her in the graveyard. I think this interaction is really interesting. So James touches her shoulder and asks if she is okay, and she freaks out. This is an interesting thing because if you look at the original cutscene for this particular scene, James never touches her. He just kind of looms over her, and it kind of looks distance wise that he's close, but he just kind of like approaches her and says, "Hey, I'm lost," and she like jumps because it looks like she was in a lot of thought, and James startled her. But in this new cutscene, he like straight up walks over her, puts his hand on this random like girl who's in a graveyard by herself, puts his hand on her shoulder and is like, "Excuse me." And she like very reasonably freaks out over it. Where I think in the original, it looked like she was surprised, like deep in thought and surprised. Um, Sorry about that. I had to pause the recording for just a few moments. That loud sound was a post Helene helicopter flying over my house. There are a lot of them, and they have been flying around a lot through Weaverville. So, yeah. Anyways, so she freaks out when James puts his hand on her shoulder, and in the original, it was implied that um, she was just deep in thought and got surprised. But I think this like adds a new kind of like weirdness to their interaction. Like, why would you go and approach a young woman in a graveyard, in a creepy ass foggy graveyard, and like instead of standing at a healthy distance and just saying "excuse me," you like have to get up into her personal space and then touch her shoulder? Like, it's kind of weird. So yeah, so you meet her. She freaks out. She puts space between them. She seems very stressed and very nervous. Um, it's a little heartbreaking too when she says she's looking for a mama and then corrects herself to a more adult mother. Um, you know, if you've played this before and you know her story, then you know why she said that, and that sentence speaks volumes to what she is experiencing and has experienced. Another interesting thing about this interaction is that James doesn't tell her he's looking for his wife. He thinks for a minute and says, "I'm looking for someone important to me." That just seems super sketch to me. Later on, he does tell her he's looking for his wife, but in this moment when I was playing it and he was about to say it and then corrected himself, I thought it was pretty sketchy. Not good, my dude. Not good. At the end of the interaction, she tells you where to go into Silent or how to get into Silent Hill, but warns you it's bad and you really shouldn't go. So for the most part, you get into the town and it's not super creepy. There's a heavy fog that shrouds a lot of the city, but it's not real creepy. The background music when you get into the city also lessens up. Before the area really opens up, though, you find your first monster that leads you into a back alley that leads you into a house. Now, I haven't played the OG Silent Hill 2. I've only watched, again, playthroughs of it. And I wasn't gonna start referencing any changes because I'm not actually familiar with it. But I do think it's like really interesting that they changed how James gets his first melee weapon. In the original Silent Hill 2, James goes through a tunnel under construction and gets his radio and his first monster encounter. But in the remake, you do go through kind of you have like a memory where you see that tunnel, and it does a thing, but you go through a different tunnel that leads you into the town, and then you follow the monster into the thing. Um, you know, it reminds me more kind of Harry from Silent Hill 1 when he first encounters the little creepy babies at the end of the alley, when he's wandering through that alley in Silent Hill and he gets attacked by the creepy babies. It just reminds me of that just a tiny bit. Also, the monster design. You get introduced to your first monster, the lying figure. So apparently, the original designer of this monster, Masahiro Ito, was heavily inspired by BDSM fashion, which is interesting because I would say outside of the weird baggy thing that he's wearing, that the lion figure wears, most of the fashion just seems kind of gothy. Like it seems kind of normal, like with the choker, not the choker, but like the platform heels and fishnets and shit. Like it just seems like stuff I've seen in goth circles. I do think that unfortunately goth fashion does get mistaken for BDSM fashion a lot, and also gets fetishized. So I do like again. I do think the most BDSM part of this design, though, is it like from the waist up. It does look like a person has been like zipped into a literal skin bag, and their arms look like they've been like bound to like their front, and it kind of looks like they're also covering themselves up, like where their hands is. Like it looks like it's down where their genitals are. Um, so it just looks like they're just kind of walking around like that. The skin bag is like super fleshy looking too. I don't know if it was originally intended to look fleshy, but the remake definitely has the lion figure looking super gross and fleshy and bloody. They also projectile vomit acidic bile at you. These monsters come in two forms: the standing lion figure and the crawling lion figure, that kind of just skeeters around on the floor like an insect. If you don't stop them after knocking them to the ground, they will start crawling around in a super creepy fashion. So after you beat your first monster, you kind of the first part of East Side Vale, of the East Side Vale, opens up in Silent Hill, and you get your first kind of hub area. This is also what shows you the mechanics of the game and how you're going to like work through the game, like what your experience is going to be. You bust out a window in the house and you jump out and you wander through the alley that leads you to different locations. You come across a couple of dead bodies that eerily look a little like James. Um, Kind of absorbed into the street, you get these notes that tell you to go to different places. You know, like the first body you hit has a matchbook that says Neely's Bar. So it's like, and then he marks it on his map and he's like, all right, so I guess I'm going to go to Neely's Bar at some point. Now, you have on your map, you have buildings that already have names on it. And generally, those buildings are buildings you can kind of just bust a window out or go through the door. And, you know, through just like observation and whatnot, you kind of get things. Um, like I think if you go to, I think it's the Texan Cafe, you get a note saying to go there or a note about a couple being there, and if you go check it out, you'll find like a jukebox coin for Neely's. So if you go straight to Neely's Bar, though, you'll find a jukebox there, and that is the big puzzle piece for this little area. You have to put this jukebox together. That will lead you to going to various different places, a tiny apartment complex, and a music store. The apartment store, or not the apartment store, sorry, the apartment, the little tiny apartment complex that you go to, also has the first of the famed James sticks his hand into something gross segment, which is a classic. He sticks his hand in a really gross asshole. Something else I find kind of neat about this area too, and this is just me kind of reading into it and having fun with the lore. I don't think there's anything behind it like this, but I do think it's interesting that you do pick up a lot of memos in different stores. Particularly the one that stood out to me was the flower store when you first enter into East Vale side of Silent Hill. You enter a flower shop, and there's a little memo about a guy there and how weird he is when he's ordering flowers and he just kind of ignores everything. And you get a lot of memos about a weird guy kind of just hanging out. Says he looks like he has a mask over his face hiding his feelings. And it sounds a little like maybe our main character, maybe a little bit. Again, I don't think there's anything there. I just think it's fun, and to me, I kind of hope that there's like some random Ending that involves like maybe James just experiencing this stuff a whole lot. That's just me though. Um, I do want to say too that the sound design is phenomenal. The music in the background is this drone, or like they go from like droning sounds to like what sounds almost like droning cultic chants in the background that intensify as you get to certain like story changes, and then detensifies and kind of goes down, and it just kind of creates this very unsettling and tense vibe that permeates throughout as you're playing the game. I would say that the sound design, however, pales in comparison to when you get to the Woodside Apartments, which is another fun place. Before we get to the Woodside Apartments, though, I do want to talk about the combat. Right now, it feels all right. You get your like with your melee weapon, your swings are pretty meaty, and you see and hear the nailed ends hitting the monsters. The monsters also get bloodier and bloodier as you hit them. Also, his grunts. He doesn't sound like a dude in control as much as he sounds like a scared weenie kind of swinging a bludgeoning item around. Like when he stomps them, he just kind of gives out this like scared scream as he's stomping them. Uh, I think that's a really interesting touch. I've heard a few commenters, and I bring this up because I've heard a few commenters talk about like the combat still being kind of janky, or that he's a little too much of a pro when it comes to counter like to the combat. Um, I think it feels fine to me. And I'll talk about this a little more in the Woodside Apartments, but you know, I've gotten clipped a few times in the starting encounters because it feels very intense, and often you're fighting these things in claustrophobic environments, and you think you can just stun lock them, but you really can't. After like two or three hits, they will usually wedge an attack in, and if you don't dodge it, you'll get clipped. And I've gotten clipped a couple of times. So um, I there are some encounters you won't be able to run away from, unfortunately, or you can. You'll just get clipped if you try. I've been running from any encounter that I don't absolutely need to use because the combat is still kind of annoying. And if I don't have to kill something, I'm just not going to do it. I would rather save my health items and my ammo. There's also a side quest too before you get to Woodside Apartments with a supermarket. If you can figure out like the market lock combo and get in, there are really fun items in there that will help you along. Um, I would say, this combat this is one of the few I think puzzles that were actually kind of hard that stumped me a little bit. You'll find hints to it throughout the area, but the hints aren't super helpful. I'm not going to tell you what the combo is. You'll just have to figure it out and get in there. All right, so the Woodside Apartments. So if you go through and collect all the pieces and play the broken record and its song, if you play the broken record in the jukebox in Neely's bar, it will play a song from James's memory that ignites another memory of dancing at the pier of Rosewater Park, and it drops a key to the backside of the bar. So you get another vague memo about a kind of very specific car in the back of the bar that you have to go find, a very specific color and plate number. So you take the memo and you follow around to the car, and next to the car is keys to the Woodside Apartments. As you pick up the keys, monsters start breaking through the dumpster area, because there's like a when you're going through the back alley area behind the bar to find the car, there's a little area that's kind of blocked off by dumpsters, and when you pick up the keys, um, monsters start busting through that area, and so you are then encouraged to run back through that area. A storm also kind of hits, and I say storm. It's not really raining. It never rains. It always like constantly looks like rain just fell, but it's never rainy. but the wind starts picking up and blowing in a direction. And I believe the direction is kind of away from the Woodside apartment. So you're kind of fighting against the wind. And the fog intensifies and blows with the wind too. Also, the monsters are super aggroed at this point as well. So, there's a bunch of them out. I would not say if you've gotten to this point, do not try to explore any further because there are just a shit ton of monsters out. They're super aggroed, and it's kind of hard at this point to like fight them in all this crazy wind. So just don't do it. Just head straight to the Woodside Apartments. Now, before the bar, um, before using the back of the bar, like the Neely bar key, if you go find a parked RV, you will find a memo about the Woodside Apartments that will put a marker detailing a way through the apartment complex to Rosewater Park. So, little fun thing there. Now, I would say Woodside Apartments is kind of where the game really intensifies a lot for me, especially in the area of uncomfortableness and the hostility. So, right off the bat, when you enter the Woodside Apartments, if you go into the office and uncover the new puzzle item, the background music will change, and only particularly in this room, to this eerie scale of tones that also sound drowned out a bit, kind of like listening to a harp or a violin or a stringed instrument playing scales underwater. It's very eerie and very unsettling. It feels very much in step with soundtracks that would go along with movies like Hereditary or Midsummer. So, a little bit after this, you also get your flashlight. And when you get your flashlight, you get jumped by a very annoying new monster called the Mannequin, which is essentially two waist and legs, bodies attached together at the waist ends with the feet cut off on the top, and they suck. They will box the fuck out of you if you aren't careful. They will also just quickly annihilate you. They're really good at ducking under your swings. And right now you can only melee them, so you have to like hit them a couple of times and then duck and then hit them a couple of times. And sometimes when you swing, they'll just like straight duck under you and just start boxing you. They'll also jump on top of you, and you'll have to like do a quick time event to get them off. They suck. I honestly didn't really think anything of it at first when I had watched combat demos of this game because I saw it and I saw them like they're just walking around, and I saw the demos of James hitting them, and I remember watching like the originals too, and I didn't think anything because I figured they would just get stun locked like everything else. And honestly, like the lion figures weren't really difficult either. Once you get used to their movements, you can just like bully them around, and it doesn't matter if there's two of them close to you, like they're slow and easy to fight. That was not the case with the mannequins. The mannequins really will give you a hard time if you don't take them seriously. They will. You cannot stun lock them. When you get your flashlight too, it is on a mannequin with a dress that is alluded to being a dress of Mary's. But what's Mary's dress doing here in this weird ass apartment? Hmm. You'll also get your first real non-melee weapon, the handgun, in room 217. It's funny because you find a note in the bookshelf next to the stairway to the second floor, and it says that there were noise complaints of gunshots coming from 217, but when inspected, the person in 217 had no weapon and there was no clear sign of shooting at all. When you get to the room, however, like every inch of the walls, the floor, and the ceiling are covered in bullet holes. Also, the gun is in a shopping cart that resides in the very center of all the path of bullet holes, the bullet hole destruction. I just thought that scenario was kind of funny. It's just one of those points where this game is just kind of unintentionally hilarious. Um, I would also say the handgun is the best way to take care of mannequins. If you shoot them once or twice in the legs, they'll drop to a knee, and then you can like annihilate them with a melee swing. This method is way safer to deal with them than fighting with the melee weapon. I wouldn't waste bullets though. Don't waste your bullets trying to actually like kill them, because you will need like 35 to 40 bullets towards the end of the apartment's scenario. So, like, two in the leg, melee them, move on. I really like the art direction so far getting to the Woodside Apartments. I really like how hostile feeling it is to explore this apartment complex. The light from your flashlight really isn't enough, and the spaces are tight and cramped on top of the pervasive darkness around you. And the mannequins literally hide in the tiniest of corner spaces and behind tall objects. Like, it's generally stress inducing when you enter into a new area and you have to slowly walk around and see, because sometimes the mannequins don't also trigger your radio. uh Only things I think moving will trigger your radio. So like sometimes you can just turn a corner and there's like a mannequin right there, and then before you have time to react it's just boxing the shit out of you. So uh it's really hostile. um it's real stress inducing. This to me is like peak survival horror. Don't get me wrong, I love the Resident Evil series, and for the most part, enjoyed my time with both uh, with both of the Evil Within games too. But it never made me feel uncomfortable to play on the level that games like Dead Space and like the Dead Space remake and the Silent Hill 2 remake made me feel. And it didn't stick with me after either. Although I will say I'll give the caveat to like Resident Evil 7. That game really was fucking stress inducing and kind of scary to play. And that was the first Resident Evil that I'd played that like stayed with me a little bit afterwards, but not as bad as these ones. I think also around this time I started having trouble sleeping. Yeah. In the Woodside Apartments, you also meet two new characters, Eddie and Laura. You meet Eddie in an abandoned room with a dead guy in a refrigerator. If you follow the vomit sounds, you will find Eddie puking his guts out into a toilet and swearing profusely that he didn't kill the guy and that he was just like that when he got there. I definitely feel like the new Eddie looks a little older than the OG Eddie design. If I'm being honest, I do really like the original puke sounds too over the new sound design. Like the original puke sounds when you approach Eddie uh, sounded like someone had literally just mic'd a dude while he was like vomiting his guts out. Um, like don't get me wrong, it still sounds good. I just think like the original was way grosser sounding. And Laura, well, she's the same little shit she was in the original game. Enough said on that. This game is really linear in how it presents itself. And you kind of see that a little bit in the open world when you're collecting stuff for Neely's bar for the jukebox, but you really feel it in the apartment complex. Like, and it's a small gripe, but I do think that this is a change that I wish they hadn't made. Like, don't get me wrong, the original was also pretty linear as far as the story goes. It's not like you can, like, you enter Silent Hill and you can go straight to, like, the bowling alley or, you know, uh, the hospital. Like, you have to go through all these different things first. But, like, when you would reach an area, at least from what I had seen, it felt like you could just explore the apartment complex to different floors and you were really just puzzle item hunting so you could move forward. But, you know, the puzzle items were really obtuse, so that made moving forward kind of hard and stressful. I've found that so far in my playthrough, that is not the case. Like, if you just keep moving forward and you explore every room, you will find the puzzle pieces you need as you move forward. Like, there really hasn't been a point other than like the side quest supermarket uh, lock combo where I really had to scratch my head on any of these puzzles. And I appreciate the immersion that it creates in narrative storytelling to tie the puzzle pieces in with the forward progression like this. But it's not really hard, and I do miss puzzles that legitimately stumped me. And if I'm being really, really honest, that was something I was really excited about playing uh, Silent Hill 2 is I had heard how hard the puzzles were, and I was excited to like use my brain matter to like figure these puzzles out, and they're really not that hard, so that didn't really happen. Um, as you progress through the second floor as well, you will come to a mesh fence wall with a very familiar character staring back at you. Because, like, in this game, essentially, you're going between the first, second, and third floors of the Woodside Apartments to get your items. Um, on the second floor, you'll come to a mesh fence with a very familiar character staring back at you, Pyramid Head. Oh, Pyramid Head. As you approach the character, your light literally starts dimming, which is a really neat effect. And your radio, of course, goes like haywire. It really makes it makes the area feel a lot more tighter, I think. Makes seeing him a little creepy. Also, there are just areas in this game where your flashlight will just start to dim a little, and it also is definitely very stress inducing in those tight areas because it's really dark and you really can't see without your flashlight. So, there is an interesting segment not too long after the Pyramid Head where you enter a room with a chair and a TV. A little ways after this, you hear a man scream and you backtrack to find some guy in a dead chair. Or some guy dead in a chair, not a guy in a dead chair. It's a little redundant. So, I've been watching Super Eye Patch Wolf stream this game while I play it, and he brought up an interesting thing. Much like I brought up earlier, all the dead bodies you encounter in the game are James's. Now I'm only 5 hours in. Like, I literally played until you meet Maria and then I stopped, so I really don't have any information on this. But this is something I noticed while I was playing too. It could be that the Bloober team, while they were trying to save money on assets, and they just decided to like reuse James' figure. But I'm really hoping there's an actual purpose to this. Kind of like earlier when I was talking about how it just felt like some of the memos and notes that you find throughout the first hub area of the game points to this weird guy just being weird. And I was really hoping that they were all talking about James and that this is just like a weird circular thing he's been doing with Silent Hill. But I don't know. Again, I'm not that far into this game. It's just a hope. I really hope that there's like this weird little tie-in because I just think that would be really neat. So, when you collect all of the coins and you do the puzzle for it, you get a key to a locked room that then leads you to the famous Pyramid Head orgy scene. Let me tell you, it's definitely still very uncomfortable and unsettling to watch. When he's done, if you follow him through the door, they will take you to the Blue Creek Apartments and the otherworld side of Silent Hill. So this is the next side of the apartments because the apartment segment is like essentially two apartments. You go through Woodside, and then when you go through Woodside, you have to do like the same thing in the Blue Creek Apartments where you have to go through the first, second, and third floors. Only the Blue Creek Apartments are way worse, dilapidated, gross, and the enemies are a little more aggro here. So much like Woodside, you have to find a series of puzzle items that become available as you unlock more passageways through the floors, and keys. You have to find more keys. The big difference is that everything looks more rusted and dilapidated, much like I said earlier. And also, when I said that like the like some of the monsters change and become a little more aggro, so the lying figures change. Now they have a little red on them and they can shoot out acidic bile at longer distances. And they can also shoot them out faster too. Like before they would just kind of vomit it in a line towards you. Now they just straight shoot them at you. When you kill them too, they explode in acidic shit all around them. And so you just can't move past that point without getting damaged. So in this section too, in the Blue Creek Apartments, you will meet Angela again. She's laying down in front of a giant mirror staring at a knife. I rewatched clips of the remake and the original to see if anything big changed in this, but nothing really did. They reworded some of the dialogue, but it mostly stayed the same. She tells James that they are both the same and that they're running away, and that's why they ended up in Silent Hill. Put a pin in that too, because that's a reoccurring theme for all of the characters, including Eddie. And we'll talk about that later, towards the end. Not of this episode, but in general of this series. She, at this point, she also sounds very different than she did in the graveyard. She sounds sleepy and like in a different state of mind, kind of like she's in a trance when she's talking to you. When James denies this, she says mockingly, "Are you afraid?" When she asks James to hold on to the knife, she also apologizes after that, like she just caught herself and snapped out of it. She asks James to hold the knife for her that she's been holding and staring at. But then she freaks out and says she's been really bad and runs out of the room, leaving the knife and a room key on the inn stand. So the Blue Creek Apartments also has two more James sticks his hand in something gross again segments. And one is the iconic toilet scene, and it's pretty gross. He literally sticks his whole ass arm into this gross ass toilet all the way to his shoulders, and his hand and arm is covered in some brown liquid after. Yuck. There's also a really creepy part in the Blue Creek segment towards the end of the apartments where you have to release two levers, and every time you do, you hear loud metal scraping and heavy footsteps. It's a gentle, I say that with air quotations, gentle reminder that Pyramid Head is just around the corner somewhere. He's here with you in the Blue Creek Apartments. Also, there's a point outside the room, either 306 or 206, I think, where the creepiest fucking mannequins covered in cloth that unnerve the hell out of me. They're literally stacked behind this mesh fence, and it's creepy and it's unnerving, and I hate it. I love it and I hate it. Also, I lied earlier. It was the Blue Creek Apartment segment where I actually started having trouble sleeping. Hard to see why, really. It's just a super chill environment with not at all creepily placed shrouded mannequin dolls. Sounds nice to me. So throughout the Blue Creek Apartments, you get 3 lettered rooms, M, H, and S. When you finally get to the S room, you find none other than the goat himself, Pyramid Head. And you know what that means? It's boss time, baby! Now I was watching a reviewer say that in the original, this encounter was really easy and you could just run to the ends of the room and shoot him and never get hit. But in this new encounter sequence, you have to be on your guard because he's so aggressive. I am very much inclined to disagree with this. I literally used the same strategy and beat him. The only times I took damage was when I tried to fight him up close and do some melees. Don't do this. Honestly, and especially if you're playing this on normal, like moi personally, you get plenty of ammo and health items, so just put 30 or 40 rounds in him from a distance and be done with it. When the encounter ends, you'll hear the iconic siren sounds and the Pyramid Head leaves. If you follow him out, you are back outside in Silent Hill and out of the other world. Following the path will lead you to Laura again. They have somewhat of a terse exchange, and Laura exclaims, "It doesn't matter, you didn't love her anyways," and then hops off the wall and runs away. She was also holding an envelope in a very pensive manner. For those of you who have played this game before, you know why she said that. For those of you who haven't, or haven't watched any playthroughs of the game, we'll come back to this again towards the end. So going to Rosewater Park will lead you to Maria. So this is your Maria counter. So the new Maria design is a little different from the original. The OG Maria's outfit was inspired by early 2000s Christina Aguilera, sporting a mini skirt and a fitted button-up sweater that shows off stomach and a butterfly tattoo on her hip. The new redesign went for a more matured, sexy look. Maria is now wearing what looks like a tight leather dress with short fitted jacket, covering up her stomach. She does, however, still have the butterfly tattoo just on her chest over her left breast. Also, they changed her choker from a band around the neck to an O-ring that looks very similar to a collar. Her hair is still blonde though, but this time with hot pink dyed tips. The conversation tone is very different too. In the original, when Maria asks if she looks like a ghost, she grabs James' hand and puts it on her chest. But in the remake, she reaches out and touches his chest. Both versions have him pushed back in a flustered manner. She also keeps an almost unblinking and both piercing and probing gaze on him. She never breaks eye contact from him unless he looks in the other direction. And if he doesn't turn back around to look at her, Maria will step into his field of gaze to keep the eye contact up. She is constantly watching him and studying his reactions. The second she touches his shoulder, his defenses the second time she touches his shoulder, his defenses drop ever so slightly, and she takes it further, slowly sweeping her hand from his jacket to his shoulder sensually. If you look at James, his expression is pretty entranced. When he tries to push back again, she probes even deeper by asking if it was because she looked like his wife. You don't want to take me around, you don't want to take me with you because, I looked like your wife. You loved her, didn't you? Or maybe you hated her. This is the phrase that breaks him, and he reluctantly agrees to let her come along. The way Maria talks to James during the cutscene isn't over-exaggerated like the original cutscene either. It's still flirty, but not nearly as overtly as in the original. It's more calculatedly sensual, with slight flirtatious sprinklings. So Maria tells you she knows a place that young couples would call their special place, and pretty much manipulates him into letting her tag along to show him. When you leave Rosewater Park, you reach Jack's Inn, which will be where the next episode will pick up. As of recording this, I am currently at Brookhaven Hospital because I just couldn't wait to play more of this game, so I kind of just played past it anyways, and started recording notes on that. I'll say it only took me an hour and a half to get there. From this point at Jack's Inn to Brookhaven Hospital, so I'm thinking maybe the next stopping point will either be after Brookhaven or after the prison. If you have any comments or questions, please email me at thenерdarchivist@gmail.com. And always, I also have a Patreon too. You can find me at the Nerd Archivist, patreon.com. If you want to support me, throw a couple dollars my way too. I'm hoping to have another episode out in a week or two. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye.